5 mountaineers raised their heads and couldn't believe their eyes. A strange green light was burning in the sky, and unnerving clumps of electric charge were appearing in the air. But they didn't look like lightning bolts. The mountaineers' hearts were full of fear. The group leader felt his hair get electrified inside his helmet. And then, to this day, no one has managed to work out what happened. The story of Soviet rock climbers in the Sairam-su Ravine is regarded as the most mysterious incident to have ever happened in the mountains. Will you and I be able to crack it together? As always, viewer discretion is advised. In mid-September 1982, members of the Republican Club of Climbers were undergoing training in the Sairam-su Ravine, Kazakhstan. Participants from different cities and Soviet republics were raising their qualification levels. This ravine is located in the south of the country, in the mountains of the western Tian Shan. In this region, there are over 80 routes of varying difficulty. However, that's not the only thing that draws mountaineers to Sairam-su. The ravine's nature stuns visitors with its beauty and picturesque views. It boasts lakes of glacial origins, such as Upper Lake. Its water has 2 distinctly separated hues, turquoise and transparent blue. On September 16th, the shore of its little brother, Lower Lake, became the camping spot for around 50 mountaineers from the Kazakh Republic. The leader of the Karaganda team was a man named Alexander Fortuna. The other group members were Serek Shazin, Timur Mailov, Natalia Befos, and Boris Polyansky. There were no beginners among them. All participants were seasoned mountaineers. By 6 a.m., September 17th, 9 different teams left the base camp near Lower Lake and separated to tackle routes of varying difficulty. The mountain peak to be conquered was 3,650 meters tall, and Alexander Fortuna's group was supposed to take an easy route. According to a Soviet scale of difficulty, it was assessed as 2B, which meant that it would take over 8 hours to conquer. Each group was supposed to leave a note at the top, and the next group had to take the previous team's note with them and leave their own in its place to make it easier to track the order in which the teams reached the top. Fortuna's groupmates were in excellent physical shape, so they decided that dedicating an entire day to an easy route was unnecessary and that they would probably be back in an hour. That's why the mountaineers left their backpacks by the foot of the mountain, where they said goodbye to the other groups. They didn't even take any extra clothes and were wearing keds instead of special comfortable mountaineering footwear, as the broadcast promised them warm, sunny weather for the whole day. The ascent started on a fun and laid-back note. The Karaganda group was walking in 2 rope teams. The training looked more like an ordinary walk on a sunny day. However, suddenly, the wind became stronger and clouds started covering the sky. All mountaineers on their routes heard a rocket signal coming from the camp. It meant that the teams had to turn back, yet despite the weather worsening, no one rushed to the camp. But a sunny morning suddenly turned into a catastrophe when snow followed the rain and a severe snowstorm hit the mountain. The rock climbers started freezing because of their rain-soaked clothes. It was also impossible to see anything through the storm, yet Gleb Agistov, who, like Alexander Fortuna, was responsible for one of the groups, noticed colorful flashes and electric charges that looked like lightning bolts. But there was no sound of thunder. Agistov immediately found a pocket in the rock to hide in with his group until the end of the storm. Meanwhile, yet another group leader, Yuri Gorburakov, was already on the top section route, accompanied by other mountaineers, when they were caught in a cloud with electric charges. According to Yuri, a strange green glow was reflecting off the rocks. He looked at a female mountaineer named Valya and was aghast to see that her hair started rising from under her helmet, as if electrified. To keep his climber safe, Yuri quickly led his group into a narrow crack between 2 rocks and told them to put away all metal things immediately. In an hour, the weather improved, and the team reached the summit. Yuri sent one of the mountaineers to check the notes from the other groups, and went down 30 meters along the route of Fortuna's group. After ensuring no one was there, Gorburakov assumed the group had already reached the summit and started their descent. Another fact in favor of this theory was that there was no one left by Alexander's group on the summit, which caused Yuri to think that another team must have already taken it. So, Gorburakov led his group down. Despite the bad weather, all the teams successfully walked their routes and left notes on the Koptau summit. All groups succeeded, except for Alexander Fortuna's. After they never showed up at the camp, Yuri Gorburakov and a rescue squad immediately rushed to the group's route, hoping to find the mountaineers there. But to no avail. a snowstorm covered the mountain again. In the early morning of the following day, when it subsided, a few rescue teams went on a search simultaneously. Closer to the summit, the mountaineers noticed Alexander Fortuna's silhouette sitting on a rock. Upon approaching him, the mountaineers saw that Alexander had no physical injuries. He had just frozen to death. Fortuna looked like he had been petrified in one moment, and the fingers on his hand were shaped into a fist for some reason. Meanwhile, a medical instructor who was part of the second team noticed a piece of orange fabric far away in the snow. He rushed to it immediately and brushed away the snow. It revealed the freezing Natalia Befus. The medic took her hand to check her pulse, but the girl wasn't breathing and was already cold. The medic saw that a rope was stretched downward from the girl to the point where it was crushed by a rock. He followed it farther down and discovered another body. It belonged to Boris Bolyansky, also dead. The rope stretched on, and the medic realized that Fortuna, being the leader, was supposed to have been the last in line. He most likely ran down to get help, but something stopped him. From the group's location, it became clear that the storm had caught the Karaganda team on the snowy slope, when only 200 meters were separating them from the ridge. Likely, the mountaineers first got soaked in the rain. Then the piercing wind and frost literally froze them in place, and finally, the snowfall finished them off. However, everyone was surprised to find the rock climbers had not just frozen, but literally turned into ice. It took several hours to thaw their bodies in the morgue. Another suspicious thing was that they were far apart. Usually, when people are freezing, they huddle together to keep warm. In this case, however, the mountaineers looked like they'd laid or sat down to rest away from each other. It was also strange that Natalia didn't detach herself from the safety rope. It looked like something had held her in place for a very long time. It might have been strong wind, lightning, poor visibility, or something else. It also didn't make sense for Boris to stay attached to the rope team as he did. Yet this wasn't the last strange thing the rescuers stumbled upon in the search for the mountaineers. In 3 places in the ravine, cows were lying with outstretched legs. A likely explanation is that their limbs were immobilized by cramps, and this kept them stuck on the mountain, unable to save themselves from the snowstorm and the strange clouds with electric charges. However, it's unclear what exactly happened to them in the ravine. Regarding the mountaineers, the official cause of their death was ruled to be simple hypothermia. They were wearing very light clothes, sweaters, thin waterproof anoraks, mountaineer chest ropes, and helmets, and that was it. For some reason, the climbers stopped in their tracks, spent a long time motionless, and eventually froze to death. But why did they stop precisely when they were supposed to go faster to hide from the bad weather? Professional mountaineers who tried to analyze this story failed to understand the logic behind this. Yes, the weather was far from perfect, but it wasn't minus 40 degrees either, and the way down to the camp would only take 2.5 hours. However, the death of 3 climbers is not this case's only mystery. We also don't know what happened to the other 2 who were walking in a separate rope team. To this day, people continue coming up with different versions of that day's events. Some even resort to conspiracy theories to explain the disappearance of Timur and Sedek. So, what could have happened to the 5 mountaineers on the slope? The rescuer who saw one of the deceased climbers with his own eyes thinks that something out of the ordinary must have happened on the mountain slope. In his opinion, it's impossible for a person to just calmly hang down on a rope and make no attempts at saving themselves. The person would have at least tried to push against the slope or climb the rope to the ledge. All the more given the fact that the rocky patch there wasn't difficult even for beginner mountaineers. The rescuer presumes that the dead guy was in good physical shape and, even despite the bad weather, he could have easily reached the camp not just in 2.5 hours, but in 1. Furthermore, if we assume the mountaineer got lost in zero visibility conditions, the rescuer thinks he could have just rolled down the snowy slope and saved his life that way. Another strange thing was that one of the deceased had bloodied fists and was laying face down, and it appeared like he had been punching rocks. It looked like he had been fighting something, and then he suddenly stopped and fell on his face. In short, the unnatural positions of the bodies and the strange electric charges in the sky made this story extremely suspicious. But its main mystery remains the disappearance of Tsiazin and Milov. For 3 years after the tragedy, the local mountaineering club continued sending search teams who combed the entire area just in case the 2 lost climbers had left their route. The rescuers also covered all of the ravines the mountaineers could have fallen into, but there were no clues to be found, not even any remains of their gear. Even if the guys had abandoned their route, gone down, and been attacked by wolves, iron elements like hooks and carabiners had to remain. Yet not a single trace of the two climbers has been found. Around 200 people from all over the Kazakh Republic participated in the search effort. A participant in the first Soviet Himalayas expedition, Everest 82, Yuri Golodov, was also involved in one of the search missions in the Sairam-su Ravine. He even descended into a bergschrund, a crack under the mountain where a thick layer of snow had accumulated since the disappearance of Sedek and Timur. Yuri was sure that the rope team had fallen into the crack, although Gleb Agistov, one of the first people to search for the two climbers, doubted this version. He believed it was virtually impossible to fall into the bergschrund. During the search in the mountains, one of the teams found a human skeleton with a round opening in the skull, but the forensics showed that the death had happened years before. Despite the bad weather being the most likely culprit for the tragedy in the ravine, many mountaineers suspected mystical phenomena related to the event. This incident is also the only one in the area that still has no explanation. In July of the same year, an unnamed instructor led a group on a hike. Shortly after the beginning of the ascent, a group member suddenly asked permission to leave the team and return to the base. The instructor agreed, although he had no right to let the person go back alone. After 10 days of the hike, when the group returned to the base, the instructor found out the guy had never turned up there. He'd also gone missing. The track was laid on a gentle slope, meaning getting lost or hurt was simply impossible. The instructor barely avoided imprisonment and only had to be disqualified. A year passed, and the skeleton of the missing guy was accidentally found in the bushes by the river, very close to the tourist base. He was recognized thanks to the remains of his clothes. However, the rescuers swore that they'd repeatedly combed the place where the skeleton would eventually turn up, and it wasn't there. There's no logical explanation for this story as well, and even that's not all of it. In 1988, near the summit of Khan Tengri, which belonged to the same mountain range where Sedek and Timur had disappeared, a similar incident happened to 3 mountaineers from Czechia. At a high altitude, 2 of them started suffering from mountain sickness, and a group of Kazakhs came to their rescue. One of them joined the Czech rope team, yet they all disappeared during the descent. There were theories that they must have fallen off a cliff, but then the other Kazakhs would have heard at least some screams. Repeated helicopter flights around the summit yielded no results. Some people started tying these frequent mountain incidents with mystical phenomena. The relatives of the climbers who went missing in the Sairam-su Ravine hold similar ideas. Sedek Syazin's brother continued the search for 8 more years by themselves. They couldn't accept the fact that their brother's body was never found. Devastated, they sought the help of psychics, who told them that both Sedek and Timur were alive, working as shepherds in Kyrgyzstan. Personally, I only trust science, and I'd much sooner believe that all 3 of them were struck by some unknown anomaly resembling a bolt of lightning. Still, one detail made me have a second of doubt that there was something supernatural about this story. The thing is, after these events, memorial plaques were installed in the mountains. All of them have names and photos of the 5 mountaineers in a black frame, since Sedek and Timur also started to be regarded as dead even though their bodies were never found. However, people say that for some reason, the frames around the 3 climbers who froze to death remain black, and the frames around the 2 missing people have faded to a lighter color. It's either a spooky coincidence or... Write your theories about the course of events in the comments. The theory should explain all the strange details of this story and have a logical basis. Also, subscribe to my channel. We have so many mysteries to crack, and I can't do this without you.